If you have followed the rules but feel unsatisfied with where that's gotten you, this podcast is for you.
We'll help you learn how to reach your goals through creativity, intuition, and flow.
Welcome to the Flow into Authenticity podcast.
Hello, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. It's the ghost of Allison.
Well, I thought we were all going to be ghosts today.
Yeah.
We just had a really interesting conversation before this. And so it's a leftover inside joke.
I think maybe the problem is there's a little bit of sleep deprivation going on, kind of all around.
Yes, for various reasons.
We are all a bit of ghosts of ourselves today.
Yeah. Ghosts of ourselves.
So bear with us.
We've got young child ghost. We've got perimenopause ghost. We've got, what's your ghost? Teenage.
Yeah, who knows? I have all the ghosts today.
You have husband out of town.
Yeah.
Oh, ghost. Husband out of town, teenage.
And teenage, yeah.
Angst
teenage
ghost.
angst,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's what we're working with today. But I'm very excited about what we're going to be talking about today because I'm finally going to learn about what the heck intuition is today. I think I know what it is, but Esther's going to set me straight. I have a feeling over the next 45 minutes or so. So we want to talk about what is intuition and how to connect to it, because that's really the key to figuring out where you want to go next in your life. You've identified where you feel stuck. Oh my gosh, I have this hot potato I'm just going to throw over to Leslie. Leslie, what did we learn about after we learned about being stuck?
Right. So we did talk about being stuck, and then we talked about trying to find some of our passions. And then last week, we specifically talked about setting boundaries and maybe thinking about some places where you could ask for help and making space for time for play and exploration.
Yeah.
And so that really leads up to this big, giant, meaty topic that Esther has so much information to offer us about intuition. So, Esther, where can we start learning about intuition? What is intuition?
Gosh, you guys are really setting me up here.
I know. We're trying to make it hard for you today.
Yes, you know, it's a challenge. We like a challenge.
I know, but people sometimes call me an intuition expert, which I think is really funny because I don't know. I mean, I feel like there are a lot of things that we know about intuition, right?
That's actually a good point. Maybe we should stop for 3 seconds and ask our listener, what do you think intuition is? What do you think we mean by intuition?
Yeah.
And kind of get a picture in your head of what you think that means.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, what do you think intuition is? And I think a lot of us really have trouble trusting our intuition. So a lot of my clients come to me because I talk about intuition a lot. And for me, a few years ago, my story is that I was pretty much just using my analytical mind to kind of make decisions, you know, and it wasn't working for me. And it was working sort of against me. And so I had a few people that I was following and listening to their stories, and they basically decided to follow their intuition and where it was leading them in their life. And so I just decided to do that in my life and decided that I was just going to follow my intuition where it led me step by step in like each step of my life. And it's been really amazing.
So what does that look like?
Okay, so I think a lot of people, it's really hard like in this culture because we really revere the analytical mind, which the analytical mind is great. I love my analytical mind. But the intuition it's not actually a feeling. A lot of people think that it's just your feelings, right? And I think we've kind of distinguished this before in this podcast a little bit, but your intuition is actually a process of knowing. It's a knowing. It's a knowledge that you have. Each one of us has it. And it's a process within you that gives you the ability to know something directly without analytical reasoning. So it bridges the gap between the conscious and the non-conscious parts of your mind. So researchers believe that about 95% of our brain, of our thinking throughout the day, is non-conscious, is unconscious, subconscious. So that means we have a lot of processes going on in our brain that doesn't go through analytical thinking. So we're constantly picking up information as we go out through the day based on our history. And our brain is constantly making connections for us.
Esther, that is so interesting to me because it just made me think of something that I tell my students, which is if there's a really hard problem that they're working on, they don't know how to solve, I tell them to put it in their brain.
Yep.
And then go do something else. Like, don't think about it. Like, put the problem in your brain and then don't think about it. And then the solution will start to emerge for you. Is that connected to what you're saying?
Oh my goodness. You're going down a whole different road with neuroscience. No, it's cool because it's connected. But yes, so we have two networks we have three networks in our brain that they've kind of figured out that neuroscientists have put into place as far as what we think. So we have the executive network, which is really the analytical, more focused, like let's say you're working on a problem and you're trying to figure it out, which is where most of us, when we talk about this idea that we've been talking about in our podcast, this idea of like, okay, the formula hasn't been working. We feel stuck. Now we're going to try to figure it out analytically. Well, that doesn't always work really. So where do we start? We start with getting into maybe a broader perspective, right? And into our intuition. And so the other network of our brain is called the default network. And so this is that really like daydreamy part of your brain, the brain that's like, last week we were talking about curiosity and play and exploration. And what your brain does when you allow these two parts to kind of work in that way, just what you were saying. This is actually an assignment that I've been giving people for a long time too. And Stephen Kotler calls it the MacGyver method. I call it curiosity question. So what you're actually doing is with your analytical brain, you're saying like, okay, here's a question I can't figure out. And then you are getting your brain into a maybe slower brainwave state, into flow, into a state where it's not so much in that executive network, but it's more in the default network where it can make connections and it can really like on the subconscious level, like do it for you. That's why when you're in the shower, right? So you ask your brain, like, what should I don't know, what's a good question that one of you is thinking about right now?
What should we do about traveling to visit family this summer? Is that the sort of thing? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so you're trying to figure it out, right? And then you take some time, maybe gardening or going for a walk or getting in the shower, right? That's why we get all these ideas in the shower. And your brain will actually do the work for you. So it goes into this, all of the subconscious, all of the different parts of your brain and makes these connections, and you'll get this aha moment, right? Of, oh, I know what I should do. And it seems to come out of the blue, right? That can be a way that your intuition can really work for you in a practical way. Mm-hmm. It's a really good example. But I like to say your intuition, so it's not a feeling, it's a knowing. So that's a good example of your intuition just working for you through ideas, right? But your intuition on a deeper level, I like to say, like when we're talking about this, like we're talking about the podcast, it's like your intuition is actually like a GPS. It's like your own inner guidance that leads you to your most authentic expression of yourself. If you listen to our first episode where we each talked about our stories and how we kind of went from getting stuck, feeling stuck, to finding what we love, we used our intuition, right? And so when we're talking about this process of now getting into, okay, exploring and playing with our passions and what we're curious about, it's really vital for us to be able to listen to our GPS, because our GPS, our intuition, allows us to pivot. So if you're like, oh, I work with a lot of creatives who really enjoy a lot of things, right? So they have a lot of interests. And a lot of times they're like, well, I don't know what to do because I have so many interests, especially at this first part where you're exploring all these different things. So it's crucial to have your intuition because it helps you to pivot. Like when you're exploring, I really love this kind of painting. Okay, I don't like this. Oh, I do like this material and I don't really enjoy this. And how does that feel in my body? This kind of mark. Or I don't know if you all have some examples of ways that you've kind of trusted your intuition, like that pivoting, of where you are going down the road, kind of exploring something and you're like, well, this. So again, it's not a feeling. I always say feeling when I'm sort of talking about, but the sensation of this just feels right, or it aligns with me more than this, right?
Well,
and
so the intuition itself is not a feeling, but you might be able to connect with it by paying attention to how you feel. Yeah.
Or the sensations in your body, right? Yeah. And I like to point out that it's very hard for us to understand in our culture, but, if you look to people like, let's say like Oprah or Steve Jobs is a great example of somebody who really followed their intuition and was a big proponent of intuition. Einstein used intuition to really innovate and come up with ideas that were just so unique and innovative and really broke the formula.
I think the GPS analogy is really making sense to me because it's like your brain has a map in it, but you can't look at that map all at once. It's in there somewhere, but if you want to figure out where you need to be headed, you kind of need to look at it through fuzzy eyes and just pay attention to what's the next step ahead of you instead of trying to get the bigger picture of the map, because we just can't process that much information all at once. Like we can only process a certain amount of information at one time. But if you're in this kind of flow state and you're connecting with your intuition, it kind of allows you to grab different pieces of the map without having to see what the big picture is. Does that relate to what you're talking about?
Yeah. Actually, Steve Jobs has a great quote about that exact thing. And let me see if I can paraphrase it. You can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust something, whether it's your gut or karma or God or intuition. Like he says, you have to trust something going forward.
Man.
Yeah, he was really into intuition.
You got that so well. Esther, was that just from your memory? Because I just Googled it. It says you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. You had it almost verbatim.
Because I've said it so many times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
I can't find any of my notes, but I can remember that, I guess.
Well, it's so
That's amazing.
powerful. I mean, it's really powerful, I think, when you start to
Yeah.
understand that.
Do you have an example, Leslie, of when you've had this experience of connecting with your intuition?
Yeah, I think about early on when I was really struggling with, I was in a job that I was very unhappy with, and I was really struggling with what to do next. And I ended up taking this class, and it was just kind of a creativity class. And this instructor was all about trying to help us sort of surrender control of the process and just play. I mean, that was her whole thing. So we did a lot of different things in the class, and what she had us do specifically was like get very inexpensive materials, lots of kids' paints and just inexpensive paper. And she would just turn on music and, she'd just say, okay, pick 5 colors. Don't think about it. Just what are you drawn to? And then, paint for a little bit or draw or whatever material. Like we used all different types of mediums. And then, okay, now stop and look at your painting and say, ask it what it wants. What does it want? Oh, it wants blue. Put blue. Just really like being very present and kind of out of as you're talking about, Esther, like out of this logical place of making decisions and having this very specific outcome focused plan. And it was just play. And we did all these different activities like that. We would draw something with our non-dominant hand or draw something with our eyes closed or paint with a partner. And it was just really an interesting experience. And it helped me learn how to feel more present and be very present in those situations where I felt very calm and I wasn't worried about anything. I was just doing it. And it was so fun to be in that state. And that was kind of a new experience for me. And it really translated when I started allowing myself to write more, because I just allowed myself to write. I didn't get so hung up, but because what used to prevent me from writing was, I don't know what to write about, right? That's a big question for lots of writers. I don't know what to write about. So that it really translated for me in that way.
Do you free write, Leslie?
Oh, yes.
Huh.
Yes, I have to. That's like an essential way for me to come up with anything and to get out of my logical mind. I have to free write.
And I use that a lot in my workshops and with my students and clients and stuff, free writing. So that's a great example of being able to learn to trust yourself, right? And I think coming from this culture where we're so in the analytical that I don't know if we've kind of talked about this before, but like all of us have this innate expression. I like to call it like your core creative essence, right? That we come into this world with. Like every baby is different, right? I think we've talked about this before. Have we?
Not sure. I don't know.
No? Okay. So every baby's different, right? Every baby is unique and we want to express ourselves even at that young age. And what happens is like, as soon as we start to express ourselves, that kind of gets pushed down, right? One of the first expressions is like pulling hair. Like we'll start to like pull hair and our parents will be like, no, we don't do that. Right.
Oh, yes.
Or like, I want to eat this. Right. Oh, no, you don't. You don't eat that. We eat this. Right. Or
Don't
you have to eat
wood
this.
chips and Play-Doh.
Right.
Eat the strawberries.
But we're constantly being told what we can't do and that we can't express ourselves, just because of the culture we're in. Right. And so we kind of grow up with this, I think, especially if you grew up as a woman, and we tend to like repress that sort of trust in our innate expression. Right. And so building that trust, Leslie, like when we're talking about being in that space of like listening to yourself, being in the present moment, and you really were in flow in what we call like deep embodiment. And it really is this sense of like, okay, can I trust myself in that deeper knowing that's in my body, And I do that with my students a lot. I do like free writing and intuitive drawing. And I actually had a class that was very similar to that. Yeah, we did a lot of those things too. And
Yeah.
yeah, I do free writing all the time because it's like when the analytical is so strong, especially with artists, like it's
Yeah.
what really holds them back from, there's so much deeper that's in the subconscious that can be expressed.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying really resonates with just the way that the culture that we are brought up in, especially if you're raised as a female, we live in the shoulds, right? We're shoulding all the time, all over us. Like everyone expects us to do this. Oh no, I should do this. Oh no, I should do that. Just because that's what we think we're supposed to do, instead of being able to learn to trust ourselves. And it's so interesting. And Allison, I'm curious how this shows up for you, kind of listening to your intuition.
Yeah, I have a lot of different ideas about what I could say here. One thing that just, it's a really common example for me is I'll get an email saying, hey, would you be interested in writing this blog post for us? Hey, would you be interested in giving this talk? Hey, would you be willing to be on this committee? Hey, would you be willing to review this paper that needs, to be peer reviewed? And every time I get something like that, I feel so honored.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. But there's this ego part of me that's like, oh, but this is a really wonderful thing that they thought of me to ask me for this. And it would be an honor for me to say yes, because it shows that people are thinking of me for these interesting opportunities. But a lot of times when I get requests like that, I'm just like, I don't want to do it. And I think I've gotten better at listening to that part of me that's like, I don't want to do it. And kind of taking a step back and thinking about it and trying to connect with my intuition. And actually, for me, like talking to my husband is really helpful, because I'll say, I got this thing today. This is how it made me feel, but here are some ways it could help me in my career if I do this thing. And we'll just sort of play around with the possibilities for what might happen if I say yes and what might happen if I say no. And thinking through that, it's kind of a creative process, because we get to imagine what the future might look like. Like, well, if you said yes to this, well, this other thing might happen and you might gain this skill that would be helpful to you in achieving this goal that you have. Or if you say yes to this, it's going to take time away from this other priority you have and this other priority you have. So it's a really kind of boring, practical example of how I try and, instead of going with my gut reaction of saying yes or no, how I try and take a step back and play with the possibilities.
Yeah.
To come up with an answer. And I know when we talk about play, we're not necessarily wanting to be goal oriented like I am in this example, where my goal is to make a decision, yes or no. But that's one way where I really need to kind of listen to what my inner knowing is trying to tell me.
I think that's a great example, because it does kind of walk through that process of, whether it's your ego or just this pressure, you're like, oh, I should do this because I'm being asked to do it, and it's kind of a prestigious thing or something, like, but knowing that maybe that wouldn't be the best choice for you right now, because like you said, it might pull you away from something else that you're working on or that's more important to you or whatever. And so I think that's a really good example of that process. And I like that you categorize it as playing with this idea, like, well, what would that look like in the future? Because I think that could really translate to a lot of decisions that people have to make and are struggling with.
I think that's such a great example, Allison. And you were also telling us before we started that you have been trying to listen to your body. I love this example because there's a few things, like you're showing that we can use the analytical mind and the intuition at the same time and playing back and forth, which is like really hard to do and
Mhm.
really great to like practice doing that. And also, you're showing us the process of play that we've been talking about in the last episode of like really keeping an open mind. And you're so good at this. I know you are because I know you. And you're so good at like seeing, being curious and playing with and exploring. And you were also telling us about that you've been playing around with feeling into your body. So we can talk about this too, but you have felt like this instinct reaction. So we'll talk about that.
Yes.
But like what sensations were you feeling that might have given you a clue that this is something that you want to do?
Yeah. So my natural reaction is to just make a very quick decision without thinking about it like, oh, I have to make a decision now. And so recently I've started trying to take a step back and think, wait a minute, how is this making me feel? Does this make me feel anxious thinking about doing this thing? Am I feeling anxious because it's going to be a challenge? Or am I feeling anxious because I just have an aversion to this request? And if I'm anxious because it's a challenge, that might mean like, oh, I need to lean into this. But if I'm feeling anxious because of an aversion, that's telling me like, oh, I just need to politely say no and try and, pass the baton to someone else. Like, no, I'm not interested this time, but can you maybe ask my colleague who might be interested in something like that? So yeah, I've just tried to notice that anxiety in a way. And then sometimes I'll get a request where I'm just like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. And I'll just feel lit up inside and I'll just say, oh my gosh, yes, I'm saying yes now. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
Full body yes.
Yeah. So I try and notice that stuff now. And I think before, maybe I didn't notice the full body yes, and I just said yes, and that was the right thing to do. But I've gotten a little bit better about interrogating my anxiety.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because I've been saying like your intuition. So when we talk about the distinction between instinct and intuition, or fear and intuition, your intuition is always like leading you to that more expanded you, right? That more authentic expression of you. So that full body yes, that feels like yes, 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 right?
Yeah.
And then, so your fear or instinct, it's kind of reverting you back to maybe those beliefs or those tendencies that make you smaller, like maybe you're overworking or people pleasing or whatever it is for you that makes you say yes to everything, right? Whatever that is for you. I had that similar need to just say yes to everything, right? And I have a video about this on my YouTube if you want to get more into this instinct or fear versus intuition. But it's like, if you think about the subconscious programming that you have, the fear in your body kind of bringing you back to that. And the intuition's leading you more into expansion and growth of your authentic self. And Leslie, do you feel in your body like sensations? And not everybody does. I just want to put that out there because a lot of people, when I work with people, with clients or in classes, a lot of people say like, I can't feel my body. I can't feel anything in my body. That's very normal, especially if you have had trauma, and most of us have.
Right.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that it's just a process of growing that and becoming aware and building the capacity for it. But Leslie, what do you feel in your body?
Well, I like that you're saying that first of all, naming that it's normal to not be able to do that, because I think that's where I started. I cannot think of a time in my life when I haven't had anxiety. So that's kind of how I operated, was in fear.
Yeah.
All my decisions were based in fear. And so Allison, I also like the way you're saying, like, you're learning to interrogate your anxiety, because I feel like that's what the difference was. And then this idea of full body yes. So I have started to interrogate my anxiety as well. And so it's taken me a long time. It's taken me years to be able to do this. it's a practice for sure. For me, it is a practice. I have to really do this consciously still because I'm still learning how to do it well. But my anxiety for me, I know shows up in my chest and my throat, and I get really like tense and anxious. And the difference of intuition or going towards something that genuinely feels joyful is that for me is in my gut, and I'm calm. I don't have the racing, anxious thoughts. I have like this calm ability to sort of just have the thoughts, whatever they are, instead of like this trying to grasp onto them. So I love this idea of the full body yes, because if that happens for you, I feel like that is the clearest thing of a knowing, right? Your body it's like, yep, we don't even have to process this because we just know.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate, right? So it definitely does show up for me, but it has taken a lot of work for me to be able to distinguish that.
Thank you for sharing that. I love hearing that because look, a lot of people have that experience. Yeah.
Is your default also to just like make a quick decision? Like, oh, they want a decision now, I'm going to make it. And is slowing down? Yeah, Leslie.
No, I am terrible at making decisions. I have
That's
really, really hard time making decisions. I'm a Libra. I'm always like, I could see it this way. I could for days draw out making a decision because I'll see all the possibilities and all the things and I'm a perfectionist because of my anxiety. So I want to do it right. So that prevents me from wanting to make a decision because I'm constantly like, what is the right choice? What is the ultimate, I'm trying to do it perfectly. So decisions are very difficult for me, actually.
Allison, I've always felt very aligned with you in that taking on a lot of things. I'm a Capricorn. I'm always like, yes. I'll do all the things. Like I'm going to do, just do. And also Leslie, like I've had anxiety my whole life too. And so I've always made those like rash instinctual decisions. For me, a lot of the ones around work were based around getting my self-worth from work.
Yes,
absolutely.
And then in the video that I talk about my decision that I made out of fear based on a need for safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back into feeling small, going back into feeling like somebody's taking care of me. So that was like a decision that I made out of fear. So it's like there's a lot of subconscious things that can cause us to make decisions, but when we, out of instinct.
Yes.
Right? And so there's this distinction between instinct and intuition. So intuition's always expanding us, always like helping us to grow into like our truest sense of ourself.
And it doesn't always feel good, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Intuition doesn't always make sense with the logical mind, right? So earlier this year or the end of last year, my intuition was like, you need to be focusing on actually this. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense to my brain who says that it needs to make money. Like this, I have a plan here, intuition. Like I have this plan and it's like, nope, like you need to focus on this. And so a lot of times our intuition will guide us to something that doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And then what happens is fear, right? It doesn't feel good.
It's uncomfortable.
So fear can actually come from that inner knowing.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, right? It's this inner knowing, like a lot of my clients are like, well, I know I'm meant to be an artist, but then that brings up all this fear. And what do you do with that fear?
Right.
And so that's where that trust comes in.
Yeah. And that's the practice part, I think, is really learning to be okay with that and trust it.
And really like when we talk about practice, it's building capacity, And so a lot of times when people talk about follow your dreams, dream big, jump off the cliff. I mean, there's so many people out there and I feel like our culture just always kind of perpetuates this. You should be following your dreams. Like you should be doing what you love. But I like to say we need to build the capacity for that. And what that means is we have to learn to trust ourselves. when we haven't been able to trust ourselves, right? And it's not our fault. It's like we grew up as babies and we've been pushed down for so long. We have to slowly start to remove those layers and start to build that trust. And it takes a lot of like nurturing of ourselves and help from our community. You know, those role models that we talked about. Like, I love talking about that. It's not just like one jumping off a cliff, because when you do that, you might not have the capacity in your nervous system. And like lotto winners, you know, they're like, oh, I want to be rich. So they buy a lotto ticket and then they win and then they spend all of their money.
Right. And then their kids get a drug problem and then they things end up a lot worse. Yeah.
Because their nervous system can't hold, and your beliefs can't hold, imagine having all this money. So you'll like abandon yourself and use something, give it all away. Same thing happens with us, right? Say like my intuition's telling me to go in this one direction. Like with artists, let's say, is telling them to start an art practice, right? Well, they put it on the calendar, but then their kids interrupt them, like their mom is calling them. If they don't have the trust in themselves that is the thing that they can trust, their intuition is guiding them, that this is going to actually become something, then they're not going to set those boundaries up. Like all of those steps that they need to actually put that in place, it's not going to happen.
Ooh, okay. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So for me, I'm like all on this kick right now about building capacity, like slowly trusting your intuition. Like it's a slow process, y'all. It's not just like you should trust your intuition because I said so, right?
Yeah, it's just go for it.
It is a
right.
process.
You need to learn things. Like Leslie, you needed to take a class, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to take classes. Sometimes you need to talk to people. You need to do research. You need to build up your skills.
Yep, exactly. Like when I went to art school, I will never forget the first day, I don't know if it was like the dean or whatever, but he gave this talk about how you may be nervous now, you might not trust yourself, but every time you create a project, you're building the trust with yourself when you make it to completion. And it's like that, you know, when your intuition tells you something and you do something really small, like following, take a walk, go to the store, take a drive, you know, meet this person, and you do it and you build that trust. It's really beautiful.
That's really interesting to me because when I applied for grad school, oftentimes master's programs, you have to pay to go to school, but PhD programs, at least in math, will pay you to go to school. And I didn't believe that I had the capacity to get a PhD in math, but I didn't want to pay for a master's. So I applied for a PhD program secretly thinking I would leave after the master's, because I couldn't even imagine that I would have the capacity to get a PhD. But after I got that master's, I realized, oh, it's just this. I just need to take one step at a time. And here's the process. I'm going to do this part, and I'll work my way up to it, and it'll happen. Yeah. So we do want kind of the easy payoff. And if it doesn't seem like we can reach our goal immediately, then sometimes we stop ourselves from investing in building those skills that we need to build in order to reach a pretty advanced goal.
Yeah, I think that's what prevents us, right, from not being able to see all the steps. Then we don't take any of the steps.
Right.
And so it's very important to just, like what you're saying, Esther, just be slow, just do right what's in front of you. Like, what's the next thing? And then the next thing after that.
That's totally the GPS example, right?
Yeah.
Yes. What is the next step? Yeah. Listening to what is the next step, right? I don't know if we want to do like the 4% now, but I can give people like a little homework assignment where they can actually a couple little things where people can increase their intuition,
their capacity to trust themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
And slowly start to kind of learn how to trust themselves.
Yes, please. What should we do?
Tell us.
So each week we're talking about the 4%, right? So what that means is 4% challenge is kind of the percent where it's not too little and not too much where it's going to overwhelm you. So what can we do that's like a little bit of growth in our life? So this week's 4% is there's a couple things that you can do. So do some free writing or journaling about when you have listened to your intuition in the past. So a lot of times people have heard their intuition on big things. Maybe like when you should have left a job or a relationship, or you knew that you were going to get a job. Or a lot of times it's actually a negative thing because our mind has a negativity bias. So a lot of times it's like a negative thing. And that's fine. Just write about when you felt that. If you felt it in your body, did you listen to it right away? What happened in your life after that? Like, did something go wrong? Did you get fired? Like, what were the steps, right? And then what happened after you left? Did good things happen after you left? So write about when you have listened to your intuition and it worked out.
This could be positive too. Like if you just meet someone and you're like, oh, I feel a connection with that person. It could be like your new best friend.
Yep.
And what did you do when you felt that connection? Or
Yeah. I like to even keep a little journal of all of the little nudges that I get from my intuition and then what it led me to. Like, oh, my intuition told me to go for a walk. And then I found this really cool book that I was wanting, like in the little book.
The free book
Yeah.
house.
Oh, yeah.
Or I met this person, right? I went to this place and I met this person and we had this like amazing talk and it just filled me up so much. That happens to me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that, right? And so like those little coincidences or big ones. And so what that does is it really helps you to like sort of build that trust muscle because your intuition is like a muscle, right? If you don't use it, you kind of lose it. So it's building that trust of that you can actually trust yourself and trust life, that it's going to support you. And so the second thing is to take like a morning. I like morning, but if you have like any time during the day where you can have at least like a couple hours to yourself. And I know, Allison, this is hard when you have babies.
Impossible. I'm glad you gave us the other homework assignment because I can do that one.
No, but what you're doing is really good. Just pausing when you have a decision to make. But if you have, what I would say in your case, it's like you're driving to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ideally, it's like you have like an hour or two in the morning, like on a Saturday morning, maybe you can get a babysitter or your partner can watch the kids or whatever, and wake up and listen to your intuition. What do you want to do? Do you want to get coffee? Like, do you want to take a walk? And then do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then see how you feel after you did that. And then after you're kind of done with that thing, then listen again. What's next? What do you want to do? So we're listening to our impulses, which is really important, right? When we are trying to reconnect with our body, reconnect with what we want, and hearing ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, later down, we can say like, oh, maybe that's instinct or maybe but when we're in a calm place of connected to ourselves, we can hear more like our intuition. What do we want on an even deeper level? So just kind of follow that thread of like, what do I want to wear, and just follow it and see where it leads you in that morning.
Are either of you Harry Potter fans?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched them, but I haven't read them.
Okay. Well, I'm sure some of our listeners are. This really reminds me of when Harry had a luck elixir and drank the luck elixir and then just kind of was open to doing whatever felt like the right thing.
Yeah.
And he just kind of followed his gut. I'm putting air quotes around gut. Followed his gut, just kind of went with what seemed like the right move. And it led him to unlocking this big mystery. So that's kind of what I'm picturing. You're asking people to get in that mindset of Harry Potter after taking this luck elixir. I think it was like liquid luck or something.
Yes.
And just sort of asking, oh, what should I do next?
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny is like his friends were saying, oh, no, you have to go here. This is the right thing to do. And he was saying, nope. I think what I need to do is go talk to this person right now. I'm going to go take a walk. And, it was different from what the logical solution would have been to the problem that they were having.
Yeah, that's such a good example because it's like, again, going back to that default mode. I like to call it like open mode, the John Cleese thing. So getting into that open mode. And seriously, I mean, that's where we can live in flow like every day, all day.
Yeah.
We can live in that deep embodiment like you were talking about, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
I just went on this vacation and it was like, I let myself do that. And it's just amazing what happens. Like when we just kind of flow from one thing to the next and be open.
Mm-hmm.
So beautiful.
And you can make time for that by listening to our last episode
Yes,
where we
you can make
talked about how to make time for stuff.
Right. How to make time.
Yeah.
Setting some boundaries, asking for some help,
Yes.
and moving away from all the shoulds and just slowing down a little bit.
Yeah. We begin to realize that we put ourselves in a lot of boxes that we might not necessarily need to. When I'm living in that sort of flow state where I'm just listening from place, from moment to moment, I have just this broader perspective and I'm like, why do I always think that I need to put myself in all of these boxes and all of these time slots? It's very weird. Like,
don't say that to me, Esther.
I
need
know,
the boxes. I need the time slot. But within, if you're like me and you need the boxes in order to keep the trains running on time, make a box, a 1 hour box, a 2 hour box, where in that box you're just going to do whatever.
But you'd be surprised. I've listened to a lot of parents who have lived in this sort of flow where they are allowing a lot more, right? So there's a lot more allowing than we think. So maybe next time we can talk about the next step, or maybe the next time, about letting go of our assumptions and expectations, which is sort of the next step in this framework of what are the assumptions, like, do I need all those boxes? Like, do I need all of them, right? Maybe I need some of them, but like, do I need all of them? And questioning our assumptions that our mind puts us in to keep us safe.
Yes. That's coming up.
Yeah. So that's
it's on the horizon.
Coming up, we're going to kind of talk about maybe the broader picture. What do y'all?
Yes. I'd also like to have a big picture. So we're slowly working our way through this flow framework that Esther has, we're writing about in our book. And so maybe we could do that and also get a bigger picture of what the flow framework looks like from start to finish.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm very grateful to have had the chance to talk to you both about this really interesting topic. Before we sign off, is there anything we need to plug or tell people about?
Well, we always want to invite people to subscribe if you are enjoying this podcast. That really helps us. And also to leave a review. That would be amazing if you're really enjoying this. That really helps us to get the word out there. Also, if you are interested in connecting to your intuition, I help my clients to connect to their intuition, to move them to the next step in their journey of finding their purpose, finding what they love in their life. So you can find out more by going to my website, flowintoauthenticity.com, or you can check out my YouTube channel and we'll put the links below. And we will see you all next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye. Flow into Authenticity is hosted by Esther Loopstra, Leslie Blumenstein, and me, Allison Henrich. Our original theme music is by James Wetzel. Podcast editing is by Dave Visaya. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Flow into Authenticity from your favorite podcast app.